Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 6.0.2 Elemental Shaman Guide. My name is Tusky, and in this video we're going to discuss the Elemental Shaman in all of its glory, covering everything. Now, this guide is designed for everyone, whether you're a new player wondering what Elemental is like to play, an experienced player looking to get into the Elemental Shaman, or a veteran shaman curious about the changes in the 6.0.2 pre-patch. This guide will cover everything you need to know. You can use the links above to jump to the various sections of this guide at will. Now, let's get started. So, the Shaman, a master of the elements. As an Elemental Shaman, you'll be using the power of lightning, fire, and earth to destroy enemies from range. However, you also have access to a suite of utility spells that can transform you from being just a pure damage dealer to being the savior of your group or raid. You have access to an on-demand cast while moving ability, allowing for bursts of movement while still casting spells. As an Elemental Shaman, you will bring passive mastery and haste to your group or raid without ever having to worry about the uptime of buffs. Not only can you apply your damage very quickly, but you have very strong cleave damage and powerful area of effect abilities. One of the staples of all Shaman, including Elemental, are totems. These provide temporary benefits to the Shaman and their allies, such as redirecting harmful spells, removing fear effects and healing them, debilitating enemies with roots, stuns, damage, or summoning powerful elemental servitors to deal damage and redirect enemy attention. You're also pretty damn difficult to kill, with the ability to mitigate a lot of damage on demand, heal yourself and others around you, and if all goes to hell, you can sit there and do just enough healing to save yourself or an ally in desperate need of aid. Your rotation is simple and pretty easy to learn, with a lot of depth for veteran players to get into. You can go from single target to multi-target damage quickly and effectively. You also bring Bloodlust with you, the most powerful raid cooldown in the game, hands down. Raid leaders will praise you for good, smart use of Bloodlust, and in combination with your other abilities, you will become instrumental to your group's success. Most importantly, the Elemental Shaman remains fun to play, with an effective damage rotation for those seeking to be just a DPSer, and a suite of tools awaiting those who wish to become a problem solver. We'll talk more about this in another section of the guide, but it cannot be overstated that the Shaman's ability to handle situations is extremely strong, and they have a very versatile toolkit. So, just what kind of spells will you be using as an Elemental Shaman? Well, one of the most iconic spells for the Elemental Shaman is Lava Burst, an extremely hard-hitting ability that will always critically strike. Another important ability, Flame Shock, places a damage over time effect on your target. If your Lava Burst hits a target with Flame Shock on them, then the Lava Burst's damage is increased by 50%. Additionally, Flame Shock has a chance each time it deals damage to make your Lava Burst reset its cooldown and become instant cast. These two spells are very important. Next up, Lightning Bolt. This is your filler spell, the one you'll be casting the most. It's a simple cast time spell that deals damage at a range to a single target. Now, if you've heard about the whole cast while moving thing, Lightning Bolt can no longer be cast on the move, and we'll talk about what that means later on. You also have Chain Lightning, one of the finest spells in the game. This deals damage to multiple enemies and can be cast repeatedly for a hell of a lot of damage. This makes up half of the combo you'll be using for multiple target damage. The second half, Earthquake, originally given to the Elemental Shaman and completely ignored, 6.0.2 has made this spell wonderful. After a short cast, you'll deal damage to multiple enemies over 10 seconds in a target area. Right now, this spell is so strong that most Shaman will be using it in their single target rotation, and again, we'll talk about that more in just a bit. You also have Ascendance, your big cooldown. This turns you into a fiery flame ascendant for 15 seconds, removes the cooldown of your Lava Burst, and turns your Chain Lightning into a much more powerful Lava Beam. You also have Bloodlust, a hugely powerful 30% haste increase for all party and raid members, lasting for 40 seconds. Additionally, you have Lightning Shield, which is an hour-long buff that deals damage to enemies that hit you. Although that may sound irrelevant, it's not. Each time you deal damage with Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, your filler spells, you have a chance to gain multiple stacks of Lightning Shield, which stacks up to 15. Your next ability, Earth Shock, which is normally just an instant cast damage spell, will consume your extra stacks of Lightning Shield to deal absurd amounts of damage. The generation and consumption of these extra stacks of Lightning Shield is called Fulmination. You have Searing Totem, which is your staple totem for dealing damage. It shoots bolts of fire at your enemies. You have Unleash Flame, which is an instant cast spell that increases the damage of your next fire spell by 40%. This is very useful to cast while moving. Finally, you have Thunderstorm. This deals damage to enemies around you and knocks them away from you. While this may sound bad, good use of Thunderstorm can save lives. These aren't all of the Elemental Shaman's abilities, but these are the ones you'll be using mostly. Now, let's move on. So, 6.0.2 has changed a lot for every class, and the Elemental Shaman is a little bit of an exception. While it hasn't been hit very hard with ability pruning, things have changed in a few areas. So let's go over exactly what's different. So, I'm just going to list off the different things. Burning Wrath, which used to increase spell power, is gone, been removed. No gameplay changes there. Chain Heal is no longer usable by us. That's fine, it wasn't really part of our kit anyway. Elemental Focus, which decreased the cost and increased the damage of spells after we crit, has also been removed. We've been tuned a little bit to compensate, so there's nothing wrong. Primal Strike has been removed. Yeah, that level 1 ability. That's good. Magma Totem is no longer usable by us. Huzzah! It was pretty bloody terrible to begin with. The weapon imbue system is gone, and all of the imbues are now passive. So for the Elemental Shaman, we get Flame Tongue as just part of our passive kit, and we don't have to refresh it, which is nice. Elemental Oath, which increases spell haste for all raid members by 5%, has been merged into Grace of Air, just ability consolidation there. Elemental Fury, which used to increase our critical damage by 50%, has also been removed. Now it's just innately part of the Elemental Shaman and really no longer has a tooltip. So we haven't really lost it, it's just built into the class now. We have lost the ability to use Healing Tide Totem. That's the first real painful one. A little bit less raid utility there. Rolling Thunder, which used to refund mana each time we use Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, has also been removed. We have extra mana regeneration now to compensate. Fulmination now stacks to 15 and can be triggered by Elemental Blast as well as Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning. These spells will now always add a stack too, so it plays much more smoothly now and you can kind of predict when things are going to happen. Shamanistic Rage no longer reduces mana costs. That doesn't matter. Thunderstorm no longer regenerates mana. That doesn't matter either. Unleash Elements has been replaced by Unleash Flame, which is the only one we have access to, which no longer deals damage, requires a target, or puts you in combat, meaning that not only can you use it on the move, and the buffs that it provides go to you instead of on the enemy if you're using one of your talents, but you can use it before combat, before the pull, without aggroing anything, which is nice. Elemental Precision has been removed, as Spirit is much rarer on gear now and Hit doesn't exist anymore. Spirit gear is now completely useless for us. Hit as a stat has also been removed, as I said, so you don't have to worry about your hit cap anymore. Earth Elemental now deals substantially less damage, making it practically useless as a DPS cooldown. It's entirely utility based now, it's for tanking adds, that's kind of it. Lightning Bolt can no longer be cast while moving. This is the big one. It's the big hit to mobility that a lot of casters are receiving, and it's one of the biggest changes we're going to see. We'll discuss more about what this means in the rotation section. Chain Lightning has a little bit of a longer cast time, but now deals more damage to compensate. We've been given a new mastery effect that, instead of duplicating our spells, has a chance to throw Molten Earth spikes at the last target we damaged for 6 seconds. The damage of this is kind of insane right now. It also increases your earthquake damage, and I think I'm sitting at about 98% extra earthquake damage. It's kind of insane. So that's our new mastery. Multi-Strike, a new stat that basically does what our old mastery did, duplicate spells, has been added. And although it's not on gear right now, the Elemental Shaman gains a flat 25% base multi-strike chance, allowing us to duplicate our spells right now, even without the stat. Finally, Earthquake deals much more damage baseline. Combined with the change to our mastery, it's viable for AoE damage. Huzzah! About bloody time. Let's talk basic gearing now. First and foremost, as a shaman, you wear mail armor and you gain a 5% intellect bonus for doing so. Cloth, leather, and plate are a no-go. You find mail, you wear it, and nothing else. A slightly better piece of gear does not make up for the loss of 5% of your most important stat. Before we get into the stat priority, however, just note that reforging is gone, and the only way you can customize your gear is with gems and enchants. For this reason, you can't really aim entirely towards one secondary stat or another, which makes the whole gearing process much easier, and it makes my job easier telling you which kind of stats to go for. So, your primary stat, Intellect. This increases your spell damage, just a flat increase to your spell damage, it's great. You want pieces of mail with intellect on them. Agility and strength are completely pointless and useless, so avoid pieces of gear with these stats on them. Your next most important stat is Mastery. This, as discussed in the What's Changed section, is Molten Earth and causes your spells to have a chance to call up earth bolts from the ground, dealing pretty damn insane damage. Your Mastery also increases the damage of your Earthquake. Mastery is still our best secondary stat, it's very strong, Molten Earth deals really high damage, and you don't need to control it in any kind of way. It's just added damage on top of your rotation. For this reason, it's a great stat and you should focus on it. Get Mastery. Next up is Critical Strike and Haste. Now, these two stats are very close to one another in terms of value, so you can really go with either of them. Critical Strike increases the chance to critically hit with every spell except for Lava Burst, which always crits no matter what. And since we have so many sources of damage other than Lava Burst, like Earthquake, Molten Earth, Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt, and Flame Shock, critical strike rating can actually be quite good. Haste increases your cast speed, lowers your global cooldown, and makes your Flame Shock tick faster. Faster spells means more spells per fight, means more damage. You can kind of go for either crit or haste here, it's up to you. They'll both serve you well, and you can easily have a balance of the two. Going for gear that has a higher item level and grants you more intellect, mastery, crit, and haste is what you want to do. Generally, you can go with either a one-hand and an off-hand weapon or a staff. Just go with whatever has the higher item level and gives you more stats. You can compare the two by holding shift while you're mousing over something in your inventory. Either a one-hand and an off-hand or a staff. Either works. Next up, gems. First of all, this is very important. You need to gem your gear. There is no excuse here. I can understand if you're using low-level gear that you'll replace quickly, but really once you get to Throne of Thunder levels of gear, you should be gemming. There's no reason to go into the Siege of Orgrimmar without gems or enchants. They're very helpful, very important, and these are the ones you want. So there are 5 types of gem sockets, and each of them rewards socketing a particular color gem into them by granting bonus stats. The 5 types of socket are Meta, which is only in your head socket, red, yellow, blue, and prismatic, which you'll only have in your belt and doesn't provide a socket bonus. For the Meta gem, you want to use the legendary quality Sinister Primal Diamond. If you don't have this and you have the legendary quest line, get to it! If you haven't started the legendary quest line, then you can't get this anymore, but don't worry. Instead, just use a Burning Primal Diamond. For the red sockets, you're going to want to use a Keen Vermilion Onyx for bonus haste and mastery. For the yellow sockets, you're going to want to use a Fractured Sun's Radiance, which is a flat bonus to mastery. In the blue sockets, you're going to want to use a Sensei's Wild Jade, which grants critical strike and mastery. And finally, for the prismatic socket, you'll want to use another Fractured Sun's Radiance for more mastery. As you can see, we're focusing on mastery. We want as much of it as we can. Next, enchants. Again, have your gear enchanted. It's helpful, it's great, and there's no excuse for not having it enchanted, etc, etc, etc. Basically, enchant your gear or I will step on your face. Your headpiece and your necklace cannot be enchanted. Shoulder pads should be enchanted with the Greater Crane Wing inscription, which adds intellect and critical strike. Your cloak should be enchanted with Enchant Cloak, Superior Intellect. Your chest piece should be enchanted with Enchant Chest, Glorious Stats, which is a flat and very helpful stat increase. Your braces should be enchanted with Enchant Bracer, Super Intellect. Your gloves should be enchanted with Enchant Gloves, Superior Mastery. Your belt should be given a Living Steel Belt Buckle, which gives it a prismatic socket that you can pop a Fractured Sun's Radiance into. Your leggings should be enchanted with Greater Cerulean Spell Thread, which increases intellect and critical strike. Your boots should be enchanted with Enchant Boots, Pandaren Step, which increases mastery and movement speed. Your weapon, regardless of if it's a one-hander or a staff, should be enchanted with Enchant Weapon, Jade Spirit, which has a chance whenever you cast a spell to increase your intellect temporarily. If you have an offhand or a shield, enchant it with Enchant Offhand, Major Intellect. A pretty good way of optimizing your gear is Ask Mr. Robot, which will help you figure out what to put where in terms of gems and enchants. It's not really that necessary at the moment, I'd say, since Mr. Robot is more about reforging, which has gone away, but if you want to use this, go ahead. Mr. Robot may disagree with what I've said here, just go with what he says. I can't optimize your gear for you, but Ask Mr. Robot can. Now onto talents and glyphs. This is the big moment. How has 6.0.2 changed our talent choices? It hasn't, really. Well, it has a little bit, but it's not quite as groundbreaking as some other classes, which is a bit of disappointment in my opinion, but let's go through it tier by tier. So, first tier. Nature's Guardian, which increases your maximum health whenever you're hit by an attack that reduces your health below 30%, is kind of not that helpful. It's just like last patch, it's just not that great, unless you're getting hit by things that won't kill you in 2 hits, which isn't that likely in the Siege of Orgrimmar. It's more of a PvP talent. Don't go with it, in my opinion. Stone Bulwark Totem, which is a totem that grants you a shield, and continues to recharge that shield for 30 seconds. Generally, this is helpful if you're taking constant ticking damage, but in my opinion, it's not as helpful as the last talent in this tier, Astral Shift, which is a flat 40% damage reduction for 6 seconds. This is not on the global cooldown, and as such is really helpful for when you want to avoid a burst of damage. This is my pick of the tier. Tier 2, Movement. Frozen Power, the first one, has its uses, allowing your Frost Shock to root a target in place. However, since Frost Shock shares a cooldown with your other shocks and not that many enemies in a raid can be rooted, this is very situational. Earth Grab Totem, which is my pick here, replaces Earthbind Totem, and instead of slowing enemies, the first time it pulses on a particular enemy, it will root them for 5 seconds. This is very helpful in a lot of situations and can sort of replace Frozen Power's root temporarily, so I go with this most of the time. Finally, Windwalk Totem. Now, this is probably going to see a lot of use in Warlords of Draenor, as it removes all slowing effects on the raid for 6 seconds. But for now, there's only one fight in all of the Siege of Orgrimmar where this would be helpful, and that's Mythic Malkorok, so I don't generally go with this. Tier 3, the Totem tier. Call of the Elements is not that helpful. Sorry, just like before. It resets the cooldown on your totems with a base cooldown of 3 minutes or less, so it won't reset your elementals. It will, however, reset Healing Stream, Tremor, Grounding, Earthbind or Earth Grab, and Capacitor totems. So this has utility, but not right now. In Warlords of Draenor, maybe, but for now I don't go with this, and I suggest you don't either. Next up, Totemic Persistence, which allows you to place 2 of a totem at once, except for fire totems. This would be great if it could work with our fire totems and allow us to have fire elemental and searing totem at the same time, but alas, it doesn't allow that, so it's not really useful. Finally, my pick of the tier, Totemic Projection. This allows you to move your totems instantly to a target location. The utility this provides is great. It allows for a long-ranged stun with Capacitor Totem, a long-ranged root with Earth Grab, and it allows you to reposition your Searing Totem if the boss moves out of its range. This is my suggestion for the tier. Tier 4. Damage. Now, this is where things get interesting, because now we encounter our first new talent. Let's talk about it. It's called Echo of the Elements, and it allows us to duplicate our spells. However, unlike before, where it was just a passive that randomly duplicated our spells, it now procs from our spell damage, and causes our next Lava Burst, Earthquake, or Frost Shock to not incur its cooldown. This poses a pretty serious dilemma in my opinion. You see, having played around with Echo of the Elements, I can safely say that it is an amazing talent. It's great amounts of fun. Controlling your extra spells adds a layer of complexity, decision-making, and excitement to the Shaman. If you want to have fun and you don't want to be a super serious raider, then I suggest this talent. Because it's just so much fun to double Lava Burst, to have 2 Earthquakes up at once, to double Frost Shock, slow enemies, and this would work great with Frozen Power from the 2nd tier, allowing you to double or even triple root enemies depending on your proc rate. It's super fun. But it is unfortunately also the weakest talent on this tier by far. Sometimes your Echo of the Elements can proc while Lava Burst is on cooldown, effectively wasting it. Hopefully the scaling up to 100 will change this. I'm not sure how, but I really hope that the Sims show this talent to be more competitive with the others at level 100. So go with Echo of the Elements if you're not too concerned about being competitive on the damage meters, because the mechanic is really fun. Okay, onto the other talents. We'll start with Ancestral Swiftness. This is a good talent now, as the passive haste is quite useful and you can macro the instant cast mechanic to a lightning bolt. Not super amazing, but it is good, so you can pick this if you'd like. Next, Elemental Mastery. This is a 2-minute cooldown, 30% haste for 20 seconds buff. It's really strong and powerful, and it's what you should go for if you want maximum damage. Use it when you use Ascendance and you'll gain a whole bunch of extra damage. However, as you can see, these other 2 talents are not quite as fun. Take my recommendations as you will, the fun aspect is only my opinion. Next tier, Healing. Now, this tier of talents is pretty pathetic, unfortunately. Rushing Streams, which makes your Healing Stream totem heal for more and also heal another target, is useless. It's so bad. Healing Stream doesn't heal for much anymore, and even with the Glyph, the extra target that gets healed isn't affected by the Glyph, so it's just pointless. Although it can be nice to throw down one mid-combat, the talent doesn't compare to the other 2 options. Don't take this talent. Ancestral Guidance, which is my pick of the tier, is next up. When activated, the next 10 seconds of your damage and healing is copied and distributed to your raid. This is great when you're AoEing, but it has received a significant reduction in strength since 5.4, so it's not the super amazing raid cooldown that it used to be. It is, however, an okay talent. Next up, Conductivity. This basically makes your damaging spells increase the duration of your healing rain up to a cap of an extra 30 seconds. Now, Healing Rain doesn't heal for that much at all, but if the raid is stacked up on the entirety of a fight, like, say, Thok, for instance, this can be pretty good. However, it doesn't compare to Ancestral Guidance in the vast majority of situations. Final tier now. Here we have 3 talents that are actually really well balanced now, which is nice. Before we discuss which is best, let's just go over what they do. Unleashed Fury makes your Unleashed Flame much more powerful, increasing your Lightning Bolt damage by 30% and your Lava Burst damage by 10% for 10 seconds after casting it. This is a buff on yourself, not on an enemy, which is really nice. Primal Elementalist turns your elementals into temporary pets that are very, very, very powerful. The Fire Elemental hits like a truck with this talent, and has a whole bunch of auto-cast abilities to do extra damage. Your Fire Elemental and Earth Elemental can also drop whatever they're doing and channel in power on you, which slightly increases your damage if it's the Fire Elemental, and reduces the damage you take if it's the Earth Elemental. However, using this is a waste of damage, because the increase is not as strong as just letting the Elemental hit the enemies. Finally, Elemental Blast, which is a hard-hitting spell that increases either your crit, haste, mastery, or multi-strike for 8 seconds. It's a good part of the rotation, and with the addition of the multi-strike buff, has extra utility compared to 5.4. Okay, now which of these 3 is best? Well, they're all really good actually. You can use any of them and do pretty well. Unleashed Fury and Elemental Blast are practically the same in terms of damage gain. However, Primal Elementalist adds a massive amount of burst to your rotation. So if you need to do a lot of damage fast in a fight, then Primal Elementalist with its Fire Elemental is the talent for you. Okay, now on to Glyphs. There's only really one necessary glyph in my opinion, and that is Glyph of Chain Lightning. This increases the number of targets that Chain Lightning hits, while minorly reducing its damage. This is great when you're doing any kind of AoE involving more than 3 enemies. Other than that, you can use what you want. A few honourable mentions though. Glyph of Fire Elemental, which reduces the cooldown and duration of your Fire Elemental totem by 50%, meaning that your Elemental will be available more often, but for less time. This can be helpful when the boss is only attackable constantly for a short amount of time. Glyph of Grounding Totem, which reflects a spell rather than absorbing it. This can be used on some boss abilities like the Dark Shaman's Froststorm Bolt, and the damage is added to you, so yay for reflecting spells. The only downside is it minorly increases the cooldown of Grounding Totem. Glyph of Spirit Walker's Grace, which increases its duration. This is especially good with the removal of Lightning Bolt while moving. Glyph of Thunder, which reduces the cooldown of Thunderstorm. Good if you need to do constant knockbacks, like for instance on Garrosh Phase 1. Glyph of Capacitor Totem, which reduces the time it takes for the totem to charge up and unleash its powerful stun. This is great in combination with Totemic Projection. Glyph of Flame Shock, which heals you each time Flame Shock deals damage. It's completely passive and you don't have to do anything extra, so it's pretty good. Glyph of Shamanistic Rage, which makes the ability dispel a magical effect on you when you activate it. This is really great for helping the healers when they have to dispel the raid. Glyph of Earthquake, which makes the spell also slow enemies. This can be great for keeping enemies inside your quake and for simultaneously slowing and knocking them down. Finally, Glyph of Thunderstorm, which is a minor glyph that removes the knockback component of the spell. This can be great if you only want to use the spell for damage, which admittedly isn't that often, but I would argue against using this glyph, as good use of Thunderstorm can save raid members' lives. Alright, onto your rotation. Now, your rotation is pretty damn simple and changes smoothly between single target and multi-target. So, let's start with your single target mid-fight rotation. This is what you'll be doing most. Your priorities are as such. If you have talented into Unleashed Fury, then cast Unleashed Flame on cooldown. Keep this buff up as much as you can. Cast Lava Burst if the spell can land before Flame Shock expires. Watch out for Lava Surge resetting the cooldown of Lava Burst. Keep Lava Burst on cooldown as much as you can. Cast Flame Shock if the spell has 9 or less seconds remaining. The remaining duration of Flame Shock will now be added to the new Flame Shock, so you won't waste any ticks if you cast the spell with 9 or less seconds remaining. Cast Earth Shock if you have 12 or more stacks of Lightning Shield. You can cast this at higher stacks, but 12 is a safe number to avoid wasting potential stacks. If you have an item level of about 555 or higher, cast Earthquake underneath your enemy. Note that this likely won't be the case in Warlords of Draenor, which is why I don't use it much in the footage in this video, but right now Earthquake is strong enough to be used in single target scenarios. If you have talented into Elemental Blast, then cast it on cooldown, slightly after Earthquake has been put down. Refresh your Searing Totem if it has less than 15 seconds remaining, and it will see a use for at least 30 seconds or so. Cast Lightning Bolt as your filler spell. While moving, use Earth Shock, Unleash Flame, and instant cast Lava Bursts to keep up your damage. Also consider refreshing your Searing Totem if you're moving and you have nothing else to do. Remember that Spirit Walker's Grace allows you to do your full rotation on the move. As a note, you will gain DPS by having 1 extra Flame Shock on another enemy. This means more Lava Surge procs, which means more damage to your main target. But more than 1 extra Flame Shock, so 2 in total, is not really worth it, so stick with 2. If you're against 2 to 4 enemies, all of which need to be damaged simultaneously, such as multiple bosses, then do the rotation as described above, but simply replace Lightning Bolt with Chain Lightning as your filler spell, only if you can hit multiple targets with the actual cast. Make sure you Flame Shock every single enemy as well. If you're up against multiple enemies, all of which need to die, so trash or lots of different adds, then start with Earthquake underneath those enemies, then use Lava Beam if you're in Ascendance, then use Earth Shock on one of the enemies if you're at 15 stacks of Lightning Shield, keep your Searing Totem up, and cast Chain Lightning as your filler spell. Don't use Thunderstorm unless there are more than 10 enemies and you have the minor glyph that removes the knockback. Otherwise, knocking the enemies away from everyone will reduce all of the raid's damage, yours included. You don't want to knock enemies out of your Earthquake. Now, let's talk about your opener for a single target fight. Right before the pull begins, use Unleash Flame to buff yourself. Then, pre-pot, so use a potion of the Jade Serpent, and put your Fire Elemental down. As the tanks go into attack, a second or so before the fight begins, start casting either Lightning Bolt or Elemental Blast, depending on if you have the talent or not. At this point, you'll want to use Bloodlust, but only if the fight calls for Bloodlust at the beginning of the fight. Make sure you know when to actually use this spell. After using Bloodlust, use your haste cooldowns, such as Elemental Mastery and, if you're part of the glorious Troll Master race, Berserking. Any racial DPS bonuses that you have, use them here. Then apply Flame Shock. After that, cast a single Lava Burst, so you put the spell on cooldown. Then use your Ascendance and start spamming away with Lava Burst. Once Ascendance ends, go into your single target rotation. Once Fire Elemental disappears, apply your Searing Totem and continue your rotation as explained earlier. Next, a few tips for your rotation. First of all, know your ABC. This is a common theme for casters and it is vitally important. A, B, C. Always be casting, simple as. Never ever just be standing there doing nothing. Unlike the melee, you don't have the safety net of melee attacks to keep dealing damage. If you're not casting, you're useless, so always cast something. If you don't have things to kill, heal people. If you don't have things to kill or people to heal, refresh your totems. Use Healing Rain to prepare for healing and Earthquake to prepare for damage. And remember, never stop casting a spell to cast another, ever. This is a waste of the spell's cast time and it is a big damage loss. Of course, stop casting to avoid mechanics, but don't cancel one spell for another, even if the second spell is much stronger. Next up, know what you're casting next. Your rotation is a priority system that is fairly predictable. Track the cooldowns of your important spells. Lava Burst, Earthquake, Elemental Blast, Unleash Flame. Find ways to track your Lightning Shield stacks, how long Flame Shock has left on the target, things like that. Think ahead, and know what you're going to cast before you do so. As soon as you push the button to cast a spell, the spell is essentially done. You don't need to do anything else with it. So, think forward. What's next? What's the duration left on your Searing Totem? How long does your Flame Shock have left? What do you have to cast next? Thinking ahead as much as possible is important. I generally tend to know what the next 2 or 3 spells I'm going to cast next will be. Combine this with the encounter mechanics and good knowledge of them, and you'll be dancing around the enemy's attacks while pumping out tons of spells. Finally, learn your rotation. By this I don't just mean know it, I mean master it. Make it become muscle memory by doing it over and over and over again. Spend time with the training dummies, do pugs, do dailies, do old content, whatever you have to do in order to learn your shaman's spells, where they're keybound, and how the cooldowns of your abilities tend to mesh at any given point. Make sure you can do your rotation without even thinking about it. That way, you'll be ready to put your mind at work, avoiding mechanics and thinking about strategy, rather than concentrating on your rotation. I can't teach you muscle memory, no guide can. You have to obtain it for yourself. The only way to do that is to do your rotation endlessly. Next, let's discuss your cooldown usage. Bloodlust. Oh, Bloodlust. It is the best raid cooldown in the whole game. Nothing compares to it, except for, the Bloodlust copy spells, but, Bloodlust was there first. So, know when to use this wonderful spell. Each boss fight has a moment where the raid will need to be bloodlusted, and it may not necessarily be at the start or the end of the fight. Know exactly when to bloodlust through learning encounter mechanics and by asking your raid when they'd like to actually bloodlust. I have guides for the Siege of Orgrimmar and Throne of Thunder LFR difficulties that might be of use in that regard. Your raid leaders will praise you for good lusting. Wow, never thought I'd say that. Next up, Fire Elemental Totem. This is our big cooldown totem, and it will update dynamically throughout its duration. By this, I mean the actual elemental summoned gains power depending on your buffs, including temporary ones. So, if you're bloodlusted, if you're using elemental mastery, if you've got trinket procs, all while the elemental is up, its stats will update to give it more damage. So try to time Fire Elemental with the rest of your big cooldowns. Your Earth Elemental, unfortunately, is kind of rubbish in terms of damage. It's not really worth its global cooldown at the moment, so it's more for utility. It can taunt a bunch of adds, but it won't work on a boss. It also has pretty low health, so unless you're in a 5-man, this totem won't really see that much use. Maybe in Warlords of Draenor, but not for now. Since you can only use one and not the other, you should always use your Fire Elemental over your Earth Elemental. Ascendance is awesome, but to get the most out of it can be a bit tricky. Since you want to only spam Lava Burst during this time, you need to have a few things in mind before you hit the button. First of all, make sure your Flame Shock has at least 15 seconds remaining, so that you don't have to waste a global cooldown refreshing it during Ascendance. Second, make sure you've already got Lava Burst on cooldown before you hit Ascendance. This just gives you more Lava Bursts overall. Third, if you've taken Elemental Blast, make sure you cast it before Ascendance as well, to buff yourself with your burst of damage. Fourth, if you've got cooldowns such as Elemental Mastery, it's a great idea to combo them with Ascendance for lots of extra damage. This is much more damage than activating them arbitrarily and separately would be. Fifth, make sure you can actually cast during Ascendance. Use it when you bloodlust for the extra damage or at any point when you deal more damage to the boss. However, make sure you can actually get all of your lava bursts off. If you have to move a lot during the fight, combo Spirit Walker's Grace with Ascendance to be able to cast while moving. If you don't have Spirit Walker's Grace available, try to time Ascendance during a point of the fight where there isn't that much movement. Right, let's move on to some useful macros and add-ons. These aren't 100% necessary to master your shaman, but I feel they're very helpful and I would definitely suggest them. First of all, macros. I only have a couple that I really use, but they can be quite helpful. First of all, an Ascendance macro. This macro just casts Ascendance and all of my cooldowns that stack with it. Berserking, Elemental Mastery, and Spirit Walker's Grace. I don't tend to use this macro very often. I more use it for Restoration than Elemental, but combining Ascendance and Spirit Walker's Grace into a single macro can be very helpful. Next, a haste buff. This macro allows me to cast Berserking and Elemental Mastery at the same time. It's really simple and really easy. Next, a helpful Wind Shear macro. This stops your casting, so it stops whatever spell you're casting and casts Wind Shear instead. Now, I did say never to stop casting a spell, but if you can choose between not casting a spell and wiping the raid, I would say stop casting the spell and interrupt. This can be very helpful in an oh shit kind of moment where you really need to get that clutch interrupt out. Those are all my macros. As you can see, I don't have that many of them, and you don't really need them, but they can be very helpful. Next, add-ons. There are some very useful ones out there, and I do suggest you get some. First of all, boss mods. Either deadly boss mods or bigwigs. Either one of these will help you figure out what is going on in a fight, when it's going to happen, and where it's happening. It's practically mandatory if you're in a raiding guild, and it does help during LFR as well. So grab a boss mod. Next, Weak Auras. This add-on is insanely awesome. If you only ever download one add-on, make it Weak Auras. In a nutshell, Weak Auras allows you to create timers, icons, effects, and animations on your screen for just about anything. Tracking buffs and debuffs, cooldowns, internal cooldowns, stacks, procs. It's insanely helpful and can give you so much information. The only downside is that it's really complicated. However, I have created a guide for it. You can click on screen now or use the link in the description to open the video. If you do click on screen, don't worry about it closing this guide. It'll open in a new tab. Next up, a good clean cast bar will help you to chain cast your spells effectively. Quartz is my suggestion here. Pretty easy to set up and customize, this cast bar add-on allows you to do just about anything with all cast bars. From your own, to your targets, to your pets, to your focused cast bar, basically all of them. You can find information about setting up Quartz as part of my basic UI guide, which, again, you can find in the description or on screen now. Once more, it'll open in a new tab. Finally, a good nameplate add-on will help you target your enemies and even track debuffs on them. I used Tidy Plates for this, and you can find information about setting it up in my advanced UI guide, which goes over streaming a user interface. Again, it'll open in a separate tab. Now, we've gone over a whole bunch of things so far. What the Elemental Shaman does, how to gear, gem, enchant, talent, glyph, and play it. But so far, this guide has only been focused on the damage dealer aspects of the Shaman. However, for someone who just wants to deal tons of damage, the Elemental Shaman might actually be a bit disappointing. Why? Well, because unless you severely outgear everyone else around you, you're not going to be top damage dealer, and the rotation is pretty simple. This is likely going to be the case a lot in Warlords of Draenor. Chances are the Elemental Shaman just won't be at the top of the damage meters. They likely won't be at the bottom, but they'll be very middle of the road, really. This may sound like bad news, but really a great Elemental Shaman is not someone who only deals damage. Let me tell you a quick story to illustrate what I mean. So, prior to the launch of patch 6.0.2, I was preparing to main a mage. I leveled one up, I got myself to level 90 a few days before the patch hit, and I did a bit of gearing. I love the way the mage plays, I really do. I thought it would make a great main in Warlords of Draenor. But when the patch did hit, I didn't have a high enough item level to queue for the new Upper Blackrock Spire. So, I jumped onto the Shaman to get footage for the guide that I made for it. While setting up my UI and relearning my rotation, I just fell in love with the Shaman again. Why? Well, there's a single word that describes it. Answers. The Elemental Shaman, and really the Shaman in general, just has answers to things. They just kind of weren't affected by the ability pruning. Well, not that much. Think about it. Let's say you're in a 5-man, right? And 5-mans are going to be pretty nasty in Warlords of Draenor. So a big spell is about to slam into the tank and kill them. Grounding Totem deals with it entirely. A big fear effect comes in. Tremor Totem to break it on the whole group. The tank dies and your group needs a few more seconds. Earth Elemental to hold the line for just a few more precious moments. Wind Shock, a reliable low cooldown interrupt. Earthbind and Earthgrab Totem for mass rooting. Frost Shock and Frozen Core for kiting. Hex for good CC that doesn't break as easily as a sap or a sheep. Purge for removing magic effects from enemies. Shamanistic Rage and its glyph for self-dispels. Cleanse Spirit for curse removal. Thunderstorm for knockback. That doesn't even cover the potential uses of things like Water Walking and Farsight and Earthquake. Not only that, but we have healing capabilities as well. Healing Stream Totem, Healing Rain, Healing Surge. We still have them, and we can help people who need it. We have so many answers in our toolkit that we can take on any situation that a 5-man or a raid might throw at us. Remember, 5-mans in Warlords of Draenor are going to be pretty tough. Having such a versatile toolkit is one of the great things an Elemental Shaman can bring to a group or a raid. If you're in a raid team, chances are you're going to be out DPS'd by the pure damage dealer classes. That's fine. Let them have their fun is what I say, because although the Warlocks and the Mages and the Rogues and the Hunters may be able to pull more damage out of their hat, we have so much more available to us. You can distinguish yourself as a great Shaman and a great Raider by not only having those answers, but by using them reliably, being the guy that your raid can lean on in so many situations. Here comes the AoE Fear. Is your Tremor Totem ready? Okay, you're on the interrupt list. Knock back this group. You're on curse duty. Where's that patrol? Farsight to check. Don't worry about dispelling me, I can do it myself. Alright, you'll handle the buff on the boss. That mob needs to be kited, you can handle it. We need an AoE root on these ads, quickly. No worries, I can grounding totem that empowered fireball. Every ounce of healing we can get, make sure you chip in. You get my point? Being an Elemental Shaman is about much more than dealing damage. Being able to do that while simultaneously helping out your raid in so many different ways is what will earn you your raid spot. Forget the top guilds and their stupid min-maxing while stacking classes, alright? Most raiding guilds aren't going to do that. Just because you're middle of the road in terms of damage doesn't mean you can't be one of the most important cogs in your raid team's machine. Use all of your abilities to their maximum potential and be a turret of pain for your enemies, while at the same time supporting your raid team, and they'll never want to drop you for someone else. Now, time to speak advanced stuff. This is for the shaman who know their class and who may be trying to squeeze a little bit more out of it. Over my time as a shaman, I've discovered, either by myself, from guides, live streams, or articles about shaman, many little things you can do to help be more awesome. So let's go over a few of them. First, Flame Shock. It ticks approximately every 3 seconds depending on your haste, and has a chance to proc your Lava Surge. As such, when Lava Surge procs, you have about 3 seconds or so before it can proc again, potentially wasting a Lava Burst. For this reason, you can time your abilities and squeeze out another spell before you waste a proc. Again, this is just more of a reason to never stop casting a spell. Stopping a spell is never a good idea, so don't do so. Just as a quick note though, when you first apply Flame Shock, it deals damage, and that damage can proc a Lava Surge, so be wary of Flame Shocking while you already have Lava Surge up. Next, Pre-Pot. It is so important. Use a potion of the Jade Serpent right before a pull begins to trigger the 1-minute cooldown so that you can use it again with your next Ascendance. And always use a potion during Bloodlust. Come to every raid with flasks and potions galore, enough for 2 potions per pull. Every bit of damage counts. Next, know how fights work, so you have something ready for every single burst of damage. A great Elemental Shaman has the ability to be a really tough bugger, and by cleverly using Astral Shift for a burst, then a Shamanistic Rage, then a Guidance, then a Health Stone, then repeat with whatever's off cooldown, you'll be one of the last raiders to die to raid damage. If an Elemental Shaman dies, it's really because they buggered up. This isn't as potent as it was in 5.4, but you can still be very difficult to kill. Next, don't use Glyph of Thunderstorm if you know what you're doing. So many people rattle on about the Glyph, and how Thunderstorm is pointless if it isn't glyphed. But these people are talking out of their asses. Thunderstorm's knockback is awesome! It's a great interrupt and movement ability. Use it to knock a ranged mob into melee, like the archers and shaman on Galakras. Or use it to stop something from casting. Or use it to knock back an enemy that's about to hit someone, like the assassins on Nazgrim or the bombs on Blackfuse. Clutch Thunderstorms save lives, and can be incredibly helpful. But don't use it too much and use it smartly. Be the guy who, when they use it, helps the raid, not the guy who hinders it. Next, Earthquake. It's really interesting. In my 5.4 guide, I was like, well, it isn't really amazing at all. It's really kind of crap, but use it here, here, and here. And now, really, it's so good that if you're in good gear, it's amazing enough that it is good for single target damage. Be prepared for that to change come Warlords of Draenor, okay? It is an AoE spell by its nature, and it will be used primarily for that. Enjoy it while it lasts for single target, but be prepared for that to change. Next up, Glyph of Chain Lightning is awesome, but it's not effective on fights where it'll only hit 3 targets, so make sure you swap the glyph out for another when you know it will be useful to do so. For instance, the Fallen Protectors can just be Chain Lightninged down if the raid is feeling nice, and really there's only 3 of them for most of it, so go with that. And single target fights can have you replace Glyph of Chain Lightning with another, more helpful glyph. Speaking of switching, your talents make you very versatile. Swapping between Primal Elementalist and either Elemental Blast or Unleashed Fury allows you to go from good sustained damage to very high burst. If you ever need something to die super fast, Primal Elementalist is your talent of choice. Just remember to tailor your talents based upon the fight, utility or damage. Anything that can potentially help the raid is great. Next, if you have a single global cooldown available and you have to move, Ghost Wolf. It's an awesome spell for movement, and make sure you put it on a good key binding so you can weave in and out of it on the fly. You may not be the first to any particular place, but you will never be last and you will always be there in time. Chain Lightning is awesome, but don't rely on it entirely. Watch how fights develop. If lots of enemies are dying, make sure you swap from Chain Lightning to your normal rotation as soon as it becomes viable. Wasting time with Chain Lightning is a bad idea. Don't just sit there and spam it. It's a mark of a lazy shaman. Also, as you Chain Lightning and things start to inevitably die, make sure you continuously target swap, so that you never have a failed Chain Lightning cast on a dead enemy. Fulmination is next, and it has been somewhat simplified and smoothed out. Every time you Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, or Elemental Blast, it will add at least 1 stack. Potentially, due to multi-strikes, it can add up to 2 or 3, and a Chain Lightning that hits 5 enemies can make up to 5, so be prepared for your Lightning Shield stacks to jump up fast. Again, this is why 12 is a good number to aim for, but just be aware that, at least for now, Lava Burst does not add Fulmination stacks, so you can Lava Burst instead of Earthshock to see if you can hit the sweet 15 stack for an Earthshock directly afterwards, without fear of adding an extra stack. Finally, your Flame Shock. You can clip this by up to 9 seconds now. I did say it earlier, but I'm just going to say it again to reiterate. The extra time will be added to the new Flame Shock as long as you've got under 10 seconds left. So you have much more time to play with when clipping Flame Shock and Earth Shock. It makes the class much smoother. Take advantage of this fact. Okay, to wrap things up, let's discuss your main goal. Your main goal as an Elemental Shaman is not to be a damage dealer. It's not to be an off healer. It's not about dispelling, using Tremor Totem, reflecting spells with Grounding Totem, looking ahead with Farsight, purging enemy buffs, or any one other thing. That's not what makes you an Elemental Shaman. It's about all of those things. It's about being a raider. Your goal is to help your raid succeed in any way you can. It's vitally important that, especially during progress, you don't whore the damage meters with Chain Lightning and Earthquake. It's so easy to. I do it, everyone else does. But really, especially on progress, don't. Think about how your damage can best be applied, and what else you can do to help the group or raid succeed. Everyone in your raid is there to kill bosses, get loot, and enjoy themselves. You can help with that by being a great shaman that can output good numbers while simultaneously healing, dealing with mechanics, bloodlusting at the right time, using your vast toolkit to help control the situation, and using your knowledge of the fights to help the rest of the raid succeed. All the while being fun, friendly, and enjoyable to be around. The shaman has changed. We're not so much the Emperor Palpatine of World of Warcraft anymore, but we still have our place. We have such a massive variety of problem-solving abilities, and that will be our caveat. That will be our leg up above the rest of the DPSers. And you can be a great addition to your team by using every single tool at your disposal. Do your great damage and support the group, and go beyond just being a damage dealer and even a shaman. Be a great raider, friend and colleague to the people that you raid with, and you'll have a great damn time. The people that disagree, the people that think that damage meters are everything and that their toolkit is for only dealing damage, they're one of three things. They're ignorant, they're stupid, or they're just assholes. Be a great raider. That is the most important piece of advice any guide can give you, ever. Be friendly, responsible, and awesome. And regardless of your class, you will be an asset to your raid. Master your rotation through hours of practice, and make it muscle memory. Use your support abilities, because they are going to be very, very helpful come Warlords of Draenor. You will be the damn savior of your group, and that is the whole point of World of Warcraft. Be a hero. Finally, and most importantly, above anything else I have said in this video, enjoy yourself. You're in a game. Master it if you can, but always, always enjoy yourself. Surround yourself with people you like to raid with, who will listen to your terrible jokes, who will chat and laugh with you throughout the evening. Make sure you enjoy all of your wonderful spells. Make sure you enjoy your time raiding. And most importantly, make sure you enjoy yourself in the World of Warcraft. That's it for this guide. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, or feedback, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. I'm more than happy to have a discussion about the Elemental Shaman in all of its glory. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck as Master of the Elements.